I did a story about this school that was a private school in Auckland that was stopping their Muslims, female students from wearing the hijab. And I'm like, I have to do the story. This story is really important. And I got people from the school like messaging me, being like, you're putting our students' health at risk. And that our staff are worried about their safety and the safety of the school. And I'm like, that's not what I'm going for. I'm trying to do something good and highlight a story. And there were stories in my career that I had to fight for, that I really had to fight for, so to prove that this was something that was important and this was something that deserved attention. You know, we spend so much time, especially as Muslims, watching ourselves in the media without actually speaking, without actually being asked what we think or what our perspective is. And so much of our story, I think, has been told for us. And so one of the things that really drives me in whatever work that I try and do is to try and reverse that, is to try and provide those platforms, give voice to people so that we are no longer being spoken about.
I'm Guled Mire, and I'm a community advocate and a Muslim African New Zealander born in Somalia who arrived in Aotearoa as a child refugee. We've finally begun to address our nation's mental health crisis, but the discussions tend to exclude people who look like me, my friends, and my family. This is Third Culture Minds. Last year was incredibly challenging for many young Muslims in New Zealand, including myself. March 15, 2019 has been described as the end of New Zealand's innocence, our darkest day. But out of this darkness came a galvanizing force, bringing young Muslims together to make New Zealand have difficult conversations about racism, Islamophobia, and the mental health of our young Kiwis. A key support for my mental health was my good friend, award-winning journalist and poet Mohamed Hassan. Mohamed has been a strong voice for Muslim communities in New Zealand before and after March 15th. He reached the voices that mainstream journalists couldn't. Mohamed was born in Egypt, raised in New Zealand, and now lives in London, where I caught up with him. Mo, thank you for the time.
Dude, thanks for coming to visit.
Yeah, no, it's a bit of an unusual experience because I feel like you would be the other way around.
It feels weird being interviewed. It feels weird being on the other side.
If I'm correct, you never really planned to start working in media, right? So you want to tell us about that story a little bit?
Yeah. So when I left high school, I basically had no idea what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I was very confused, like a lot of people are. And my dad is an engineer. My mom is an engineer. My grandparents are engineers. So I ended up going into engineering school and immediately hated it and made me miserable. And I realized that I would make a terrible engineer. And I jumped into journalism and media and filmmaking and radio.
Yeah.
And I found myself there. I found my voice there, and it just matched. And I felt so much more comfortable doing something that I was good at and really passionate about. When I finished journalism school, it took me 6 months. For 6 months, I'm applying left, right, and center to every job I could find. And not a single person is getting back to me for an interview. It was hugely demoralizing. And at some point I started thinking, is my name the hindrance here? Like, is that the reason that I'm not getting interviews? So I woke up one day and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take a photo of myself and then put it on the CV.
It's the blue eyes.
I swear to you, from the first interview that I applied for, I got it.
Wow.
I'm not saying that I wasn't getting jobs because of discrimination, but that's how it felt.
Big part of me doing this series is I really want to highlight what the impact racism and discrimination and things like that are having on us on a daily basis. How did it impact your well-being going through this? I mean, because, we came to New Zealand, the idea was you go to university, you're supposed to have a good job like this, and then life hits you. How did that impact you?
I went through so many days where I felt like I'd failed in my professional career. I felt like that I wasn't getting to places as quickly as other people. There were times where I felt like I wasn't getting the encouragement that I was seeking from people around me, from my peers. And it got to a point where I'm like, okay, maybe I tried this out, going into journalism and media, and it failed. So maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm not cut out for it. Trying to break into something on your own without even being able to find people to seek out advice from, that is difficult. That is really difficult. And I'm thankful that I was able to meet people in the industry along the way that gave me the right advice. In our generation, we have to be the ones to break through And then once we're there, then younger people can look at us and be like, oh, Guled works in government.
Yeah.
That means I could do that one day, you know? And it's an opportunity that they never even knew existed. It's a door that you've opened just by being there, just by putting your foot through the door and refusing to give up.
When the stories are so deeply personal to you, I can imagine, you know, it must have been really stressful in these periods and processing it. It must have had an impact on your mental health.
You know, when I was doing the podcast, when I was doing Public Enemy, it was a podcast about Islamophobia and discrimination and counterterrorism and profiling at airports and a whole bunch of things that I was familiar with through my reporting, but also through my contact with the community. And that process was difficult. It was really depressing. I was trolling through hundreds and hundreds of hours worth of media, news stories, footage, interviews. And the interviews that I was doing with people from the Muslim community, most of them were very depressing. Because you're talking to people that were at the wrong end of counterterrorism policies in the country. People that were being harassed by police since they were kids. People that had been followed and harassed by intelligence officers who maybe were not going about their protocol in the most transparent way possible. And all these stories were not being told. And even within the Muslim community, people were afraid of talking about these things openly. And having to kind of go through that entire process definitely took a toll on me mentally, because it's one thing, I think, to report on something that you're disconnected from, because you're doing it in an empathetic way. But when it's your lived experience and when it's your community that you're talking about, and you're also trying to do it professionally and separate yourself from it enough to not sway what you're trying to say, it's difficult.
Employment is a big indicator of well-being outcome, positive well-being outcome, right? But on the other end of the spectrum, it can also lead to, you know, bad mental health and well-being outcomes if workplace is stressful and so forth. And I know when I was working on an area that was close to my lived experience, I was taking that stress with me home.
You're absolutely right. It's when you're working on stories on a day-to-day basis, you're able to, at a certain point, leave the office and switch off. It's kind of different when you're working on something that is very personal to you, because you do take it home. There were stories that I worked on obsessively, where day and night I was working, recording, editing. You feel responsible for these people's stories. And you feel like, in some instances, you're the only one that's able to bring them across. And that's the scary thing about journalism too, is that, like, once you hit publish on a story, it's out of your hands. Like, it's out there. And spending all this time doing these stories about, you know, racially motivated attacks and people's feelings about alienation and not belonging in a country, and in the lead up to the Christchurch attacks, when it happened, it was surreal, because I don't want to say that we weren't surprised that it happened. We were definitely shocked. We were horrified. But there was, I think, a lot of people that I spoke to that felt like something was coming. Not something this horrific, but that people's voices were ignored for a long time. People's concerns were ignored. And that was one of the most heartbreaking things and most difficult to deal with, even from mentally speaking.
Yeah, it was a crazy period. Did you just personally, how did you deal with it? And what helped you get through that period?
If I'm completely honest, I just worked through it. I really just worked through it. I put all of my emotions into my work, and I think as a result, if I'm honest, I was never really able to process it properly. Maybe not in a healthy way. I felt like I just channeled all of my energy into doing these stories and working around the clock, day and night. And then once I was back away from New Zealand again, it kind of felt like I hadn't really dealt with it. And maybe this is something that's going to take years for us to be able to really come to terms with.
Yeah.
Because people forget that this is such a small community that almost every single Muslim family in the country knew someone directly or indirectly that was in that mosque. That's how small our community is.
I often also just wonder in terms of, for our communities, it's been really difficult just talk about mental health. Even in the Somali culture, there is no word for mental health. So we say wali, which is literally translated into English, crazy. So that's the added extra sort of stigmas that we have to navigate around. And I know that's very much so for some Muslim communities. Was that also your case? And how did you manage to overcome that?
I mean, I've dealt with a lot of mental health issues during my life personally. In my early 20s, I went through clinical depression and anxiety. I was diagnosed with it. I struggled a lot. It was probably the worst time of my life. And one of the most difficult things to have to deal with during that time is that community stigma, and to be able to just talk about it. I mean, my family didn't want me to talk openly about it at all. Again, because of that stigma that comes through. In a lot of our communities and a lot of, in our parents' generation, they never spoke about mental health. They never spoke about mental illnesses or depression or any of these issues that are very much real. Poetry was a way for me to be able to express myself, to talk about the things that I was thinking about and going through and feeling. And it was a really powerful tool for me to be able to talk about Islamophobia, about discrimination and racism, but also about identity, about coming to terms with my own cultural background and my own name. Like getting this courage to be able to say my name properly to people. And I got to a point where when I finally said Mohamed Hassan when I was meeting people, it's amazing just how much power your name can have.
I still say it the way my first white teacher said it. The way she corrected me in front of the classroom until I learned how to stumble over my identity the way she did. To strip away parts of myself that couldn't be marketed to a Western tongue. I still shave off my curly hair and wear blue to bring out my eyes. So beautiful, where did they? Mohammed. 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 Mohammed.
We're really lucky and blessed to grow up in a place like New Zealand, where it's a country, I think, that is far ahead of a lot of other countries in terms of conversations about mental health. And I think had I been somewhere else where those conversations weren't happening regularly and where there wasn't this much kind of public support, I don't think I ever would have been able to talk about it or even deal with it personally. Seeing people, young people from the community start doing poetry or start talking about mental health or start getting into media and journalism, it's that idea that once you see somebody in that space, either becoming a journalist or becoming a spokesperson for the community or working in government or talking about mental health, that makes it okay for you as a young person to do the same. And so for us, I think it's really important that these conversations are starting because there are so many people that need help, that desperately need to be able to talk and just talk about their lives and talk about problems in their life and what they're going through, and to be able to do it in a healthy and welcoming environment. And so I think it's on people like me and you to be able to talk about these things, because as soon as one person talks about it, that stigma slowly starts to break away.
On that note, I guess we look forward to having you back in New Zealand.
Thank you, bro.
And I look forward to seeing what you achieve, my brother.
Likewise.
Yeah.